This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Parshas Vayeira. Pasuk says, "Vayigdal hayeled vayigamal." The child, referring to Yitzchak, he grew up. Vayigamal, he was weaned. Literally, he stopped nursing. Vayas Avraham mishteh gadol b'yom higamal es Yitzchak. Avraham made a big party on the day that he weaned Yitzchak. So literally, this means that on the day that Yitzchak stopped nursing, about 2 years old, Avraham made a big party on the day that Yitzchak was weaned. Now, why he would make a party on the day that he was weaned, it was considered a simcha. It means the child has reached a certain type of maturity. But still, we don't find in halacha that anybody makes a suda when a kid turns 2 years old. Actually, my son is becoming 2 on Friday. Nothing planned. We should, in Yana D'Yoma, when your kid becomes 2 years old, you should make a suda, but we don't find anything like that. Now, Tosfos says in Masechta Shabbos that actually this word B'yom Hi Gamel is a gematria. Hey Gimel is gematria what? 8. B'yom Hey Gimel on the 8th day. Mal, that he was circumcised. Es Yitzchak. In other words, this is a remez to a suda by a bris milah. Because after all, you could ask, why should you make a suda by bris milah? It's a mitzvah, very nice. You don't make a suda every time you do a mitzvah. Let's say on the first day you put on tefillin, there's no inyan of suda. On the first day a kid puts on tzitzis, there's no inyan of suda. Why is there an inyan of suda by bris milah? But here's the makar. B'yom hi gamel es Yitzchak, hey gimel is 8. Hey gimel 8, mal es Yitzchak. However, Rabbi Glatstein, there's a medrash, the medrash Rabbah says in Parsha and Gimel, Ois Yud, Vayigdal hayeled vayigamal, the child grew up and he was weaned. Rabbi Hoshia Rabba Amar, Nigmal miyetzar hara, when he was weaned off of his evil inclination. Now, when is a person weaned off of their evil inclination? The Mefarshim on the medrash says that when a boy becomes 13 years old, the Yetzer Hara is finally challenged. Actually, the Yetzer Hara enters a person at birth. If you look in Masechta Sanhedrin, the Be'er Sheva asks at birth, but we know Esav already was kicking to come out in utero. Okay, but that's for a different time. But the Gemara says in Parak Chelek that the Yetzer Hara comes at birth. La Pesach Chatos Roivetz. There's a Piskei Tosfos, I believe Masechta Nedarim, that says that the malach that teaches the baby Kol HaTorah Kula is the Yetzer Tov, and when the Yetzer Hara comes at birth, it kicks out the Yetzer Tov, and then at 13 years old, the Yetzer Tov comes back, and now finally you're weaned off the Yetzer Hara. In other words, before a kid is 13, he's in complete dominion of the Yetzer Hara, and at 13 years old, now we have a match. Now they're both in the boxing ring. Now there's a Bechira Chavshis. Okay. So according to the Eitz Yosef, according to the Medrash, the Suda that Avram Avinu made for Yitzchak was a Sudas Bar Mitzvah, and accordingly this is the first recorded Bar Mitzvah party in the Torah. And as far as I know, it's the only recorded Bar Mitzvah party in the Torah. Avraham made a Bar Mitzvah bash for Yitzchak Avinu. Why at 13 years old? Who says 13? Where does that come from? Why 13? What happens at 13? At 12 years old and 354 days, then you're not a Bar Mitzvah. And at 13 years old, all of a sudden you become a Bar Mitzvah. Where does it say in the Chumash that 13 years old makes you a Bar Mitzvah? So the Rosh writes in a tshuva, V'shasha'alta, number 4, it's Tshuvas HaRosh, Klal Tazai Nois Aleph, Me'ayin lanu de ben Yud Gimel Shana v'yem echad hu bar oinshim. How do you know that when you're 13 years old, you're responsible? Avo pachim we can learn not before, says the Rosh, Da ki halacha l'Moshe misinaihu. It is halacha l'Moshe misinai. That means is when Moshe Rabbeinu went to Har Sinai, Hashem said, Tefillin, not purple, not green, they're black. Where does it say in the Chumash? What Parsha? Show me the pasuk that tefillin have to be black. Doesn't say it anywhere. That's the definition of halacha Moshe misinai. It was passed on to Moshe Rabbeinu straight up. Hashem also told Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, you know at what age you become Bar Mitzvah? 13. And the Rosh says it's included in all the Shiurim and all the various technical aspects of details of halacha, where it doesn't say in the Chumash, these are all halacha l'Moshe Sinai. At 3 years old, a girl is considered roi labia. At 9 years old, a boy. Simone Sris until age 20, and so forth. Okay, so Parshas Vayeira, everybody thinks is the Parsha of Bris Milah. No, not just Bris Milah, also Bar Mitzvah. So this was a really good excuse for me to talk about a topic that I've been itching to speak about for a very long time, and that is the topic of Bas Mitzvah. So, I know that there are people listening from across the spectrum. You have people say, Bas Mitzvah? What? How could you even talk about it? Chas v'shalom. And I know there are people listening that, what do you mean? What's the question? Of course, a Bas Mitzvah. It's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, you have to make a Bas Mitzvah. But our rule is we don't shy away from any topics. And we hope not to insult anybody, but nevertheless, Torah hi, and we need to learn what do the Poskim say about Bas Mitzvah celebration. Should you do it? Are you obligated to do it? Are you allowed to do it? Is it prohibited to do? Is it an Isser D'Rabbanan? Is it an Isser D'Oraisa? Or is it a big mitzvah? So, we're going to start with Pesach of America, the last century, Hagon Rav Moshe Feinstein. Rav Moshe actually wrote four tshuvas on this issue. The first one he wrote in Yud Aleph Shvat, Tavshin Tezayin, to Rav Baruch Aron Pupka in 1957. He says, regarding those who will want to make a Bas Mitzvah, number one, you cannot make a Bas Mitzvah in a shul. Can't do it in a shul. Even at night. Even if there are no men there. Why? It's a rule. In a shul, you can't make a Suda unless it's a Sudas Mitzvah. So you say, how could we have a Shiur? So let's understand, this is not a Suda here. This is a Shiur. Right? This is a Shiur. It happens to be that people are eating. Just make sure we're right. This is Be'etzim. But you can't just eat in a shul. It has to be a Sudas Mitzvah. Says Rav Moshe, the ceremony of a Bas Mitzvah is not a mitzvah. It's a divrei reshus. That means it's discretionary. And he says, vehevel ba'alma. It's nonsense. A Bas Mitzvah is utter nonsense. You say, that's not nice. We're not discussing that. We're saying the reality. It's nothing. Okay? There is no source to allow such thing in a shul. Says Rav Moshe, and the reality is, and you might not want to hear that, the source of Bas Mitzvah comes from Reform and Conservative. Say, what are you talking about? Where did Rav Moshe get his facts from? Well, Rav Moshe knew the history, so I'm going to read to you a little bit of the history of this ceremony of Bas Mitzvah. 1922. It's not on the sheet. The first American Bas Mitzvah celebration took place. Mordechai Kaplan, anybody ever hear of him? The founder of Reconstructionist Judaism had a daughter, Judith, who was turning 12 years old. That Shabbos, Judith walked up to the bima, read from the Torah. Even the liberals in the audience were shocked. Now, from Jews would like to think that a Bas Mitzvah actually is a very important way of encouraging young girls to strengthen their observance. Well, you got to get the facts straight. The American Jewish Historical Society, which by the way is not a Haimisha Moisad, right, to say the least, in their entry regarding Judith Kaplan's Bas Mitzvah, discusses the changes that sprang from that moment in time. Okay, you ready? Change came very gradually. As late as the 1930s, despite Judith Kaplan's path-breaking example, only a few conservative synagogues had adopted Bas Mitzvah, and of course no Orthodox synagogues adopted it. By 1948, however, 1/3 of conservative congregations conducted them. By the 1960s, the ceremony became the norm within conservative Jewry. A number of modern Orthodox congregations have now adopted some form of Bat Mitzvah as well. 1922 it was innovated, but it is now an American Jewish institution. Ad kan divrei, the American Jewish Historical Society. So it is clear that this is an invention of Reform and Conservative Judaism. So you say, so what? And I don't think I ever did this before, but there are many Jews who are listening to the Shiur who don't necessarily affiliate with Orthodox Jewry. So we just have to explain that Halachic Judaism always shies away from anything that was instituted by Reform and Conservative, because these are not recognized as legitimate forms of Judaism. Unfortunately, we love every Jew, but the reality is those are not legitimate ways of serving Hashem, and they don't work. Unfortunately, those Jews are disappearing from the face of the map in the United States of America. And Rav Moshe says, because it was innovated by Reform and Conservative, we can't do it. We should stay away. And therefore you cannot practice it in the shul. Says Rav Moshe, what if a father wants to make a simcha in his house? He could do it. But says Rav Moshe, it's just a simcha. It's like a glorified birthday party. You could always make a birthday party. You could make a birthday party for your mother-in-law, for your father-in-law, for your Aunt Matilda. You could always make birthday. You could also make a birthday party for your daughter when she turns 12 years old. Says Rav Moshe, listen to this. If I would have the power, I would be mavatel bar mitzvahs. What's a bar mitzvah? Bar mitzvah? Bar mitzvah is the kid gets an aliyah and he starts fulfilling mitzvahs. And we're going to see there is halachic basis to have a celebration. But bar mitzvahs today, where people have to come and they have to buy special clothing and they have to waste 6 hours of their life and they have to take pictures and you have to throw out your hard-earned money. Why? Says Rav Moshe, it was up to me, I would stop bar mitzvahs. I would stop them. By the way, once we're on the topic, I mean, who am I? But what's a vart? What's a vart? When the world is that? Very nice, we're happy, you got engaged. Let us know when the chasana is. Now you have to throw out thousands of dollars. And I have a shiur, I have a chavrusa. I have to stop learning. Very good, mazel tov. I'll send you a check, but why do I have to... What do you think Rav Moshe would say about all these things? Nonsense. What could you do? You know, we live in the times, you got to keep up. Rav Moshe writes, if he would have the strength, he would... By the way, if somebody here says, I'm not going to do it, you know, kol hakavod. You have some backbone, you have some... you're a man, not a wimp. Everybody has to do the same thing. Everyone goes to the same hall, the same food, the same caterer. It's all a waste of time. Says Rav Moshe, if I would have the strength, I would abolish the practice. And then I'll explain why. Says Rav Moshe, all bar mitzvahs and bas mitzvahs do is it causes people to be mechalel Shabbos. So you want to say, what good things did I do? You know what good things you did? You had a relative that otherwise might have been sleeping, and now he's driving to your bar mitzvah. That's all it did. And we'll see. This is the nice way of saying it. But Rav Moshe concludes his tshuva that you want to do something in your house, no problem. Better not even to do something in your house, says Rav Moshe, for a bas mitzvah, but to do it in a shul, it's asur. It's asur. Now he doesn't mean in the catering hall of the shul, in the social room of the shul. He means in the main sanctuary. Now what if the main sanctuary of the shul, like over here, I cannot take responsibility for what this place is used for. But what if a hall is dedicated not only for davening, but it's also dedicated for renting it out for simchos, which means it was built al tanai that it could be used for discretionary activity. So Rav Moshe writes in number 6 in Orach Chaim Chelek Beis Siman Lamed that if a shul is built to use for discretionary activities, then you can make any birthday party. You can make a party when she turns 11, when she turns 120, when she turns 580. You can make a birthday party every year. Not a problem. Don't think you're making a bas mitzvah party because it's a sudas mitzvah. Says Rav Moshe, there's no mitzvah. You're not doing something admirable. You're not doing something noble. You're not doing something to promote Judaism. So better not to do it in shul. And also, so Rav Moshe, you ask my advice, don't do anything at home either. That was 1957. Now the reality is in 1957, Orthodox Judaism was very weak in this country. And conservative and reform probably was something to reckon with, something to deal with, something to be afraid of. Are we imitating them? Are we mimicking them? Are we trying to be like them? 1959, the next tshuva in the Igros Moshe, was written from a Rav who I once met him. I actually heard him speak. Don't tell anyone. Otherwise I might get in trouble. The name of this rabbi is Rabbi Meir Kahana. That Rabbi Meir Kahana, that one. Rabbi in Howard Beach. Okay? And apparently from the question of Rav Meir Kahana, that's how Rav Moshe Feinstein refers to him, so we'll go with his title. Rabbi Kahana felt that by celebrating Bas Mitzvah in Shul, it would encourage girls to be more observant, to be more Shomer Shabbos, to participate more in synagogue service, and so forth. And he wanted to know, could they have a Bas Mitzvah in the Shul? Could he maybe, I know they do this in some places, they call up, I know if people are listening, what kind of place is it? We're speaking to a large spectrum over here. Sometimes, I know of a place, they'll call up the girl to the podium, and the rabbi will present the girl with some kind of sefer in honor of her Bas Mitzvah, or, even if they don't do that, they may mention it from the podium on Shabbos. And the question is, to what extent can a rabbi acknowledge a Bas Mitzvah? Says Rav Moshe, Bas Mitzvah is a glorified birthday party. You cannot do it in a shul. Rav Moshe seems to have taken back, even if the shul is built out tonight. Says Rav Moshe, you want to make a kiddush? No problem. I mean, people make a kiddush for all kinds of ridiculous things. People make a kiddush. They're making a kiddush. They're going to Eretz Yisrael. They're not going to Eretz Yisrael. They passed the SATs. They failed the SATs. This guy, he's making a kiddush. Baruch Hashem. Who knows what, right? His team won the World Series. Not this year, but, right? People make kiddush for ridiculous. Says, you want to make a kiddush for Bas Mitzvah? No problem. You could do so. You want to speak at the Kiddush? Could the rabbi speak at the Kiddush? The rabbi could speak at the Kiddush, but he cannot speak from the bima, he can't speak from the podium. That is a certain legitimacy that this is a recognized ceremony. The rabbi should not get up and say, we want to welcome all the choshev guests who've come to be mishtatef in the simcha. No, none of that. None of the regular rabbinic type of introductions when it comes to simchas. The rabbi should not address in a formal way, not from the podium, not from the bima. At the herring, at the kiddush, he could stand right next to the kichel and the herring, and he could say, we want to wish mazel tov to this family, to this young lady who has become a Bas Mitzvah. So Rabbi Kahana said, but I already agreed to let the Bas Mitzvah take place in the shul. So Rav Moshe said like this, if you already agreed to have it take place in the shul, and it's going to be embarrassing for you to retract, or it's going to cause a machlokes, so let this one slide, let it go. But from now on, cannot let a Bas Mitzvah take place in a shul. Says Rav Moshe, but you think that having a Bas Mitzvah is going to bring girls closer to Torah? No, it's going to bring girls closer to boys. That's what it's going to do. It's not bringing anyone closer to Torah. Nobody ever came one iota closer from a Bas Mitzvah, and says Rav Moshe, a Bar Mitzvah either. I never saw, and I could vouch for that, I never saw somebody come back from Bar Mitzvah, it's mamish, I said, such a holy feeling of Devekus to Hashem. It was such a Gehaibene Bar Mitzvah, that now I'm going to start learning Shas and Poskim, I'm going to become a Gadol Ador. No. You come back, you can't even hear yourself talk, because the music was so loud. You're full, it was a waste of a night, and nothing good ever happens, says Rav Moshe, not from a Bas Mitzvah, not from a Bar Mitzvah. So my advice is, keep it away as much as possible. Okay. That is the Psaka Rav Moshe. Again, Rav Moshe says a Bas Mitzvah is not a Sudas Mitzvah. Therefore, it cannot take place in a shul. To have something in the house is mutter, but not recommended. And Rav Moshe says, even Bar Mitzvahs, not a fan. I would stop the whole Avada, the boy should get an aliyah. If he wants to be Messiah and Masachta, it's a beautiful thing. He wants to say a pshatel, very nice. But to have a whole party with some waiter walking around, passing out little hot dogs, well, what is that? I have to lose out an hour of my life because I have to go to a hall and stand around while they hand out hors d'oeuvres. It's a waste of time. Okay. There's another tshuva. And this tshuva, Rav Moshe is addressing a question on the tshuva that we started with, right? If you look at number 5, Rav Moshe said that a bas mitzvah is not a sudas mitzvah. Well, what about a bar mitzvah? Is a bar mitzvah a sudas mitzvah? So you need to know the following words of the Yam Shel Shlomo. Yam Shel Shlomo is one of the Gedolei Achronim. Some even write Yam Shel Shlomo is the greatest of all the Achronim. The Yam Shel Shlomo in Masechta Baba Kama in Perek Zayin says the sudas bar mitzvah she'oisim ha'ashkenazim. A bar mitzvah celebration that Ashkenazim make, Sfardim are smart enough not to do it. But the Ashkenazim, they make a sudas bar mitzvah. L'chayra ein l'cha sudas mitzvah gedola mizu. There is no greater sudas mitzvah. Why? He says Ushma Yechiach Aleha. Just think about the name. It's called Bar Mitzvah. Get it? Mitzvah? It's a mitzvah, says the Yam Shel Shlomo. Says the Yam Shel Shlomo, you make a simcha, you give shach v'ayda to Ribbonu Shel Olam, that you're zoicha, that your child is chayv in mitzvahs, and he's mitzuvah v'oisa, and here is the $1 million raya. This is the raya that all the places can bring. Listen carefully. It's a raya from the Gemara in Kedushin Daf Lamed Aleph. Rav Yosef said that if somebody would tell me that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that a blind man is pater from mitzvahs, I would make a big suda. Rav Yosef was blind. That's why he knew Targum. Rav Yosef was an expert in Targum. Rav Yosef said, if anybody would tell me that the halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that a blind man is pater from mitzvahs, I would make a big suda. Why? Because I'm pater and I do mitzvahs anyway, and I'm so great. And the fact that I'm pater and I do mitzvahs anyway, that is a cause for celebration. But then when I heard the halacha Rabbi Chanina, that Gadol mitzvah v'oisa, mimisha eina mitzvah v'oisa, that it's better to do a mitzvah when you're commanded than to do a mitzvah when you're pater, then I say fakir, I say adarabba, that if somebody tells me the halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, that a blind man is chayiv in mitzvahs, then I'll make a suda. Why? Because I would like to be chayiv in mitzvahs, because when you're chayiv in mitzvahs, you get more reward. So says the Yam Shel Shlomo. Here you have a man, he was chayiv in mitzvahs his whole life. And he would make a suda, not on the day that he became chayiv, he was always chayiv. On the day he found out that he's chayiv. In other words, here's the blind man, he didn't know his whole life is chayiv in mitzvahs. But he would make a suda when someone gives him the piece of knowledge that a blind man is chayiv in mitzvahs, says the Yam Shel Shlomo. So kal v'chomer, all the more so, if someone actually becomes chayiv in mitzvahs, namely a bar mitzvah boy, he should make a suda, and the father should make a suda, ein lecha sudas mitzvah gdol mizu, because if you make a suda when you find out that you're chayiv in mitzvahs, certainly you should make a suda when you actually become chayiv in mitzvahs. But then the Yam Shel Shlomo says a whopper. You ready for this? Says the Yam Shel, but that's only if you make the suda boy b'yom, on the day you become a bar mitzvah. I remember my bar mitzvah, Baruch Hashem, my parents made a very simple thing in the house. I didn't have no music, no dancing, no waiters. But we did it boy b'yom, on the day. Day of my bar mitzvah. It happened to be smack in the middle of the summer, Chavav Tammuz, nobody's around anyway. But I got over it. I overcame that. But on boy b'yom, it's a sudas mitzvah. But says the Yam Shel Shlomo, but now you're going to make a suda 2 weeks later. It's not your bar mitzvah. Is that a sudas mitzvah? No, it's not a sudas mitzvah. But now I'm celebrating that I'm chayiv in mitzvahs. No, says the Yam Shel Shlomo. Who says you're chayiv in mitzvahs? In order to be chayiv in mitzvahs, it's not enough to be 13. You need to have 2 hairs. Does anybody know the kid has 2 hairs? No. But the Gemara says chazaka d'Rava, that when a boy turns 13, midrabanan, you could assume he has 2 hairs. Says the Yam Shel Shlomo, Olam de Shavar, listen carefully. If you want to rely on the chazaka of Rava, that when you turn 13, probably you have the simonim of maturity, then the night you become 13, rely on the chazaka of Rava and celebrate. Why didn't you celebrate right away? Because maybe we're not so sure about that chazaka midaraisa, then we're not so sure 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, says the Yom Shel Shloimeh, is nothing. It's a glorified birthday party. It's not a Sudas Mitzvah. So if you do a Bar Mitzvah by B'yayim, Sudas Mitzvah, you could do it in a shul. If you make a Bar Mitzvah not on the day, it's not a Sudas Mitzvah. You can't do it in a shul. Yeah, but my great aunt, she's not going to be able to make it from Wyoming to the Bar Mitzvah. Good, so find a social hall, but don't do it in a shul. But then the Yom Shel Shloimeh says like this. But if you teach the Bar Mitzvah boy to say a pshetel, to say a Dvar Torah, to give a speech, then this is no less than a chinuch habayis, chanukas habayis, that the poskim say that if you speak divrei Torah at a chanukas habayis, it becomes a Sudas Mitzvah. So if a Bar Mitzvah boy, if it's boy b'yoyim, it's a Sudas Mitzvah. If it's not boy b'yoyim, you better make sure the kid says a Dvar Torah. If the kid doesn't say a Dvar Torah, then it's not a Sudas Mitzvah. But says Yom Shel Shloimeh concludes like what Rav Moshe said. He says in general, with all these sudos and all these parties, the less you do, the better. So anytime you have a dilemma, should I get a party planner? No, the answer is no. If you're not sure, the answer is no. Should I go an extra mile? The answer is no. If you're not sure, don't do it. Don't do it. You have extra cash? Speak to me, I'll tell you what to do with it. Okay? I'll let you know. Don't do it. Should I make the party? I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not. You know what you do? If you're not going to make a party, make a mishmar night. Gather everyone in the shul. Say, tonight, we're going to learn Gemara in honor of this and this and this. I have a very good idea. Anybody needs any ideas, I'll let you know what to do. Okay. This I could still say over here in Queens, and right now in Queens. I'm just joking. They're listening now. Okay. So you got that? According to the Yom Shel Shloimeh, boy b'yayim is a Sudas Mitzvah. Not boy b'yayim, you have to say a Dvar Torah. Fine. Next question. Pri Megadim asked the following question. We know when a kid becomes a Bar Mitzvah, the Ramah says you make a bracha, Baruch Atah, or the way we say it is, Baruch Shepatrani Me'onshai Shalazah. You make a bracha. Basically, the father says, it's a good thing I got him off my back. Right? The simple explanation is that a parent is obligated to train the child. There's a mitzvah of chinuch. And a child who sins, the parent is responsible for their sin. And when a child turns a bar mitzvah, then the father makes a bracha, I'm off the hook. I'm no longer responsible for the kid's actions. The Pri Megadim asked the following question. A father is also responsible to train his daughter. There's a mitzvah of chinuch on a girl. So when a girl turns 12 years old, why doesn't the father make a bracha, Baruch Shepatrani Me'on Shasholazeh? That's the kasha of the Pri Megadim. And the Pri Megadim basically answers as follows, that the obligations of chinuch from a father on a daughter are not as many. The father doesn't have to train the daughter in as many obligations as a father has to train a son. And therefore it's not such a simcha to get the responsibility of a daughter off of the back of the father. Okay, with that introduction, we come to the fourth tshuva of Rav Moshe. And this is an unbelievable tshuva. This is where the lumdus of this topic lies. This tshuva was written in 1959 to a Rav Zalman Halevi Oiri. And Rav Zalman Halevi Oiri asked the following question. When you make a bar mitzvah, what are you celebrating? Shachiyanu v'kimanu v'yanu baruch Hashem, now my son is zoicha to wear a borsulina. Right? What's the simcha? That the kid is wearing a big black hat? That the kid, what's this the simcha is? That the child is obligated in mitzvahs. So why would that not apply to a girl? A girl is also now, at 12 years old, obligated in mitzvahs. Right? A girl, according to the Rambam, must daven midairaisa once a day. For Ashkenazim, the Mishnah Berurah goes like the Ramban, that a girl needs to daven midrabanon, shachris, and mincha. You hear this? Mishnah Berurah is very machmir. Mishnah Berurah paskins like the Ramban that a girl is obligated to daven shachris and mincha. Now, many Ashkenazic girls are lenient. They follow the Mechaber, and they follow maybe like the Sardim, like the Rambam. Magen Avram, I believe, goes like the Rambam, only to daven once a day. And according to the Rambam, if a girl wakes up in the morning and says, Alaikai Neshama, she's already Yotzei. But those who follow Mishnah Berurah, a woman would be obligated to Amshach Mincha. Now, a woman who has a household and is busy, so a lot of places can say Oisek b'mitzvah pater min mitzvah. But why wouldn't a father celebrate his daughter becoming chayiv in mitzvahs? If he's celebrating his son being chayiv in mitzvahs, why should he not celebrate his daughter being chayiv in mitzvahs? She's chayiv in many mitzvahs. She's chayiv in tefillah. She would be chayiv in hafrashas challah. She would be now not allowed to violate any of the lavin in the Torah. She can't speak lashon hara now. A lot of things she can't do. So the same way a father celebrates the chiyuv ha-mitzvahs of a boy, why wouldn't he celebrate the chiyuv mitzvahs of a girl? Says Rav Moshe. You know what? That's a very strong question. That's a very strong question. It would seem like there's no difference. And Rav Moshe says, look in the Pri Megadim. Pri Megadim asks that why doesn't a father make for his daughter Barsha Patrani Ma'unshar Shalazah? And the Pri Megadim gives an answer. But we don't find the Pri Megadim ask, why doesn't a father make a Sudas mitzvah for his daughter? Apparently says Rav Moshe, we don't. It's not brought down in any poskim that there's a Sudas mitzvah for a girl. But why not? There seems to be no chiluk whatsoever between the simcha of a boy and the simcha of a girl. Again, for those of you who instinctively say, what? How could you say it's a Sudas mitzvah, Bas mitzvah? Rav Moshe is saying there's no chiluk. There's no difference. The reason why it's a celebration to have a bar mitzvah is because the child becomes chayiv in mitzvahs. So a girl becomes chayiv in mitzvahs at 12 years old. When Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Har Sinai, one of the things Hashem told him was, Moshe Rabbeinu, at 12 years old, a girl becomes chayiv in mitzvahs. A boy at 13. So why do we celebrate a boy at 13? We don't celebrate a girl at 12. But Moshe gives a hair-splitting chiluk. A very subtle chiluk. Listen carefully. Says Rav Moshe, there's a difference between a girl and a boy. What's the difference? The simcha that a girl should feel when she becomes 12 is no less than when a boy becomes 13. It's only the following, says Rav Moshe. That when a boy becomes 13, you know what you celebrate? You celebrate the fact it's recognizable that he's different. How is it recognizable? Now he could be a 10th man in a minyan. Now he could be part of a mezumin. Now he could... In other words, there are things he could not do before that he's now eligible to do. But a girl, we don't see any change in her. See, but now she's obligated in mitzvahs. Yeah, but she could have done it before. There is no recognizable difference by a girl between before 12 and after 12. Now, you don't make a Suda because I'm different. Imagine somebody, you come to a big party, what are you celebrating? I'm different. And how are you different? I'm just different. I'm more connected. You don't make a Suda just because you personally are more connected. You make a Suda if it's something that people could recognize what has been achieved. By a girl, there's nothing that is recognized. By a boy, his ability is apparent to others. People see, now he could be mitzaref to minyan. Yesterday, you had a marav, 9 people. Sorry, pal. You have to wait another 12 hours. Today, daven, he could daven for the Amud. By a girl, nothing. We don't see any change in her. Says Rav Moshe, therefore, for a boy, bar mitzvah is sudas mitzvah. For a girl, bas mitzvah is not a sudas mitzvah.
Question. How about a girl? Can she now, once she turns 12, is she now allowed to get married?
She get married before 3 years old. She got married. Okay. Your great grandmother, Rivka, she got married at 3. Right? Now, somebody today asked me a very good question. Shtarka kasha. Because Rav Moshe says, what about Rav Yosef? Rav Yosef said he would have made a suda if somebody would have said a blind person is chayiv in mitzvahs. How would that have been recognizable to other people that a blind person is chayiv in mitzvahs? So Moshe says it will be recognizable because if he would be pater from mitzvahs, he can't be moitzi other people in a bracha. And now that he's chayiv in mitzvahs, he can be moitzi other people. So my friend Rav Baruch from Forest Hills, he asked me, but a woman, when she turns 12 years old, she could be moitzi other people now in brachas. So you say, what? Who? What kind of shul do you go to? Girl could be moitzi? I don't know about you, but there's a siman in Shulchan Aruch, siman Reish Ayin Aleph, Sif Beis. Shulchan Aruch says, women are mechuyavos in Kiddush, and therefore they can be moitzi men. It's halacha. What can I tell you? Halacha. A woman who's 12 years old can be moitzi a man in Kiddush. You say it's not nice. I didn't say if it's nice or not. If there are people around, it's not nice. But let's say a husband's not feeling well. Let's say a husband doesn't feel well. He can't drink the grape juice. So somebody even asked me. Somebody was ill. Somebody was sick. They couldn't drink. What should they do for Kiddush? They want to know, could they use tea? I said, no. Your wife should make Kiddush for you. Doesn't mean she should sing it. She should say the words. What? It's the Sif and Shulchan Aruch. What can I tell you? So why isn't that recognizable? That's a recognizable difference between before 12. Maybe the answer is it's not recognizable because nobody knows about it. It's not something she does publicly. It's not maybe what Moshe means. It has to be something recognizable in a public forum, not just a marked difference, not just a difference that people would see. It has to be able to be seen in a public arena. You make a suda when it's something of note. Okay, that's possibly what Moshe holds. Okay, now we need at least 15 more minutes here. We're going to another. So according to Rav Moshe is not a fan of Bas Mitzvahs. You're not allowed to do it in shul. At home, Rav Moshe says, you want to make a birthday party? No problem. But it's no different than her 10th, her 13th, her 16th, etc. Shilas Teshuvah Zakan Aaron, Rav Aaron Valkin, 1927. Question was raised by the Rabbanim in London. 3 questions. You ready? And this gives you an idea of where Bas Mitzvah came from. 3 questions. Number 1. Could you make tfilasam tfilas keva? What's tfilasam keva? Keva stands for koil be'isha erva. Can you have female vocalists accompanying the chazan? You bet no. Yeah? You have a nice chazan with one of those big hats, and then around him you have a bunch of koil be'isha erva, women vocalists. That's question number 1. Question number 2, could you play the organ in shul? Not on Shabbos, on a Monday and Thursday, right? You want to play the organ on... No wonder they couldn't get a minyan, But you want to play the organ. And number 3, could you make a Bas Mitzvah? Yeah, you see where these three questions together. Have women singing in the shul, having an organ in the shul, and Bas Mitzvah. Now, he doesn't quite ask it like Bas Mitzvah. They want to know about confirmation. You see, in the Christian religion... They have a ceremony when a child reaches some state of maturity between 10 and 13. And I don't know what happens. And now they're royal in Avala or something. So they make they make a suda, they make a confirmation. So the shaila was, could they make a confirmation for a girl when she reaches maturity at the age of 12? So, says the Zakan Aaron, even if these things would be permitted, but the fact that they've been adopted by the sinners of the Jewish people, you have to abandon them. Rashi says in Parsha Shoiftim, on the pasuk, "V'lo yisakim l'cha matzeva asher sonei Hashem lekecha," that the avos hakdoshim made matzevos, right? Yaakov Avinu made a matzeva. But as soon as it was adopted by idolaters, then we need to stop it. Well, even if these things started off as Jewish practices, the fact that they have been adopted by the way, the innovators of the Reform movement, means we need to stop it. Says the Zakan Aaron. These people who want to make these institutions, he uses a very unusual expression. He says, Oise Maseh Zimri, Umevakshim Schar Pinchas. They act like that great sinner Zimri, and they want to be rewarded like Pinchas. They bring a foreign fire into the Beis HaMikdash. Says the Zakan Aaron, you want to know my opinion? To have such a celebration, you're going to have ta'aruvos, you're going to have mixed company, men and women together. Says the Zakan Aaron, my opinion is, you're over 7 lavin and 2 mitzvahs aseh. So it's a good trivia question. What happens when you make a Bas Mitzvah? You're over 7 lavin and 2 mitzvahs aseh, according to the opinion of the Zakan Aaron. And he brings down, he said, if only people would know, this is pretty frightening. He said, many achronim say, nowadays, a lot of women, they go to shul for Parsha Zachar. Some achronim hold like this, that even if women are chayiv in Parsha Zachar, they still shouldn't go to shul. Why not? But it's a chiv d'oraisa. But how about all the Isurim that come about? What happens after davening? What happens? I heard in some places that when the men come out of the shul, there are ladies in the lobby. Can you imagine such a thing? It's not a good thing. You know how many Isurim could potentially be violated? You have to make sure. In a shul, men go out one way, ladies go out another way. To the point where Achronim write that if there's going to be some kind of ta'aruva, it's a mixture in the shul, then even things that women are chayim midoraisa, maybe they shouldn't do it. Maybe it's not worth it. He says the following: we don't want to change the minhag avoseinu, even if this would not be asur. We never saw this. Our ancestors never did this, and therefore he gives a lot of chizuk to those rabbanim who stand up for traditional Judaism, which never saw this type of innovation, this type of celebration. Okay, so Rav Moshe is clear. Rav Moshe is not a fan of the Bat Mitzvah. He says, don't even do it privately. If you want to do it, it's not usher. Zakan Aron, now, you have to understand. There's a difference between Rav Moshe writing in 1957 and the Zakan Aron writing in 1927. If you're in Europe in 1927, contrary to what most people think, reform was rampant. The Gedolim say that in Europe, and this is not how they teach it in the history books, but these are the facts. In Kovna, in Lithuania, in the 30s, in 1932, buses took Yidden to go to work on Shabbos every 20 minutes. 1938, buses came every 5 minutes, and buses packed with Yidden to go to work on Shabbos. Say, Rabbi, you weren't. I heard from Victor Miller, he was there in Slabodka. The Gedolim said, I believe, Rabbi Chanan Wasserman said that in Europe, ein bayis asher ein shames. Every house was affected. So you're living in Europe and you hear that, they want to insert certain type of reform practices in a shul. The Zakan Aron said it's Yehorig Ve'al Yaver, it's Abuzrai Da'arayis. They took it very seriously. 1957 in America, Reform Conservative were strong, but Orthodox was somewhat separate. Rav Moshe frowned upon it, but he didn't say it was usher. He just said you don't do it in a shul. Take a look at number 15. This is the Shas Tshuva Sridei Eish, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg was one of the very interesting Gedolei Yisrael, very broad-minded. He was a great Gaon. He was a great Talmudist. He was one of the Balei Musar. He learned in Slabodka and the Mir. But he was also knew many disciplines. He was a master in Hebrew literature. He was a master in Russian language. He was a master in nearly all academia. He later became the Rosh Hashiva of the Hildesheimer Institute, where one of his Talmidim was the Lubavitcher Rebbe, was a student of the Sridei Eish. At the outbreak of World War I, he went to Germany. He studied at the University of Gießen, and he got a PhD in Masoretic text. So he's a very interesting personality. 1939, he fled from Germany. He ended up in Poland. He ended up in the Warsaw Ghetto. Luckily, he was saved from the gas chambers because he was a Russian citizen. So they imprisoned him with other Russian citizens, and ultimately he came to Switzerland. He was nifter in 1966. So he was also asked the question about Bas Mitzvahs. Is it a violation of V'chukay Seim Lo Yisei Lechu? After all, it's rude. It's a mimic of Christian practice of confirmation. So he said, first of all, you have to know, when does V'chukay Seim Lo Yisei Lechu apply? For example, he disagrees with Rav Betzalel Zolti. There was in the early years of the state of Israel, the army has a certain procedure, and all armies all over the world have this procedure. When one of their soldiers fall, they have an army funeral. What happens at the army funeral? Part of the ceremony is they fire cannons. And Rav Betzalel Zolti forbid. He said it would be prohibited for the Israeli army to fire cannons. And the Sridei Eish says, I don't agree. Why do nations of the world fire cannons? It's a sign of respect. It's not idolatrous. Anything that you do as a sign of respect is not a v'chukay seim lo yisei lecha. So, for example, Goyim wear jackets. You can't wear a jacket. Goyim wear glasses. I wear glasses. Goyim wear shoes, so now you have to walk barefoot. Anything that Goyim do as civility, as normal behavior, you're allowed to copy if they're doing it not for Avodah Zarah, just that's a normal way of behavior. So therefore, says the Sridei Yesh, says Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, why do Goyim make even a confirmation? It's a family celebration that a child reached an age of maturity. It has nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. So if you want to make a Suda, when your daughter becomes of age, she's reached the age of maturity, it would not be a violation of But then he says the following, and I recommend that you read this inside. It's on page 4 of the third paragraph. Says the Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, there are many Gedolim and many Rabbanim and many Erlich Hayidin that here's their problem with Bat Mitzvah. It's not what they did in the Altaheim. The Tata didn't do it. They didn't do this in the olden days. Says the Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, this is not a taina. Why? Says Rabbi Weinberg, let me explain something to you. It used to be in the olden days. Girls didn't need to go to yeshiva. They didn't need to go to school. Everything they learned, they breathed in the home. They saw their mother. They saw their father. They saw the way the house was run. The air, the atmosphere was permeated with traditional values of Yahadus, of Judaism, of Yiddishkeit. His language is, they cannot suckled it from their mother. They breathed it in the air. All the halachos, they didn't have to be taught. They understood it through osmosis. It permeated the home. But unfortunately nowadays, what permeates the home? What permeates the home are the ideals of the street, the ideals of secular society. And girls in those days, they went not to yeshivas, to public schools. And what do you think they teach them? Every value that's antithetical to Torah mitzvahs. And that is why Baruch Hashem, the Gedolei Yisrael, instituted a great practice that today we have a Beis Yaakov movement. Now you should know when the Beis Yaakov movement started, not all the Gedolim were in support of it, but the Chafetz Chaim very much encouraged Beis Yaakov. But they didn't do it in the Altaheim. I didn't see it by the Tata. Sometimes that's not the end all. I didn't see it by the Tata. It's a good feeling, it's a good instinct, but that's not the ultimate barometer if something is correct or not. What's the ultimate barometer? Says Rabbi Yechiel Yaakov Weinberg, you have to do what's good for the Jewish people. And that's why the Gedolei Yisrael ultimately said, we need to make yeshivas for girls. Well, he says the following language. V'shuras hahigoyon hayashar v'choivas hapedagogi mechayiv kamat lachug gam labas hagaasa l'chiyav hamitzvos. He says logic dictates that when a girl becomes chayiv in mitzvos b'zman hazeh, you need to recognize it. You need to make a suda. Why? But my tata didn't do it. Good argument. Put it in the pot. But you know what the ultimate argument is? Seichel hayashar. Now you say, that's very dangerous. To start using your own judgment, you're right, it is very dangerous. But here you have a Gadol Yisrael saying that his observation and his judgment is that if someone understands the state of the dar and the state of the generation, it would be proper to have a recognition of this. And therefore, because he says if you look around the world, women are not the way they used to be. Because out in the world, in the secular world, you have emancipation, you have liberation, and so forth. So these are all antithetical to Judaism. But you have to understand, women are still living on planet Earth. They see what's happening in the world. To completely ignore the tendencies would not be a wise thing to do, says Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. He says like this. I would tend to agree with Rav Moshe Feinstein. He quotes Rav Moshe. He says, don't do it in a shul. First of all, it's not a Sudas mitzvah. But then he brings the following idea. And again, we don't mean this as insulting to any Jew, no matter what your affiliation is, but you have to know what the halacha is. Besides the concept that you cannot mimic the Gentiles, there's also another concept that we learned from the Gemara Masechta Chulin, Daf Mem Aleph. You're not allowed to do anything that gives credibility to deviant Jewish movements. What do I mean by deviant Jewish movements? I mean non-halachic Judaism. Unfortunately, throughout our history, there have been many, many breakaways from traditional Torah Judaism. Unfortunately, they all share one thing in common. They have no descendants today who are Jews. That's what they share in common. You're not, so says Rav Yaakov Weinberg, if Bat Mitzvah was invented by Reform and Conservative, even if it's just for logical reasons, you cannot do anything that supports them. So this is a very interesting idea. That even if other movements of Judaism do certain things that are logical, let's say they have certain charities, should we participate? What's wrong? You're helping poor people. No. We cannot do anything that gives them substantiation, that gives them credibility, that assists them. And therefore, Bat Mitzvah, which was invented by Reform, therefore says Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, listen to this nuance. See, he's a very interesting personality because he's machshiv, he's a Baal Musar. He understands the hergeshim of people. He understands the trends of the times, but he also understands the limits of the halacha. He says like this: you cannot do it in a shul because Reform and Conservative do it in the shul. But what should you do? You should do it at home. This way they get recognized and they feel that you're giving importance to this milestone. But if you do it in the shul, that would be a violation of giving credibility to the Reform and Conservative. And therefore he concludes the following. He says, it all depends on why you're doing it. If you're doing it l'shem shamayim, l'shem mitzvah, then it's admirable. If you're doing it to mimic certain movements, you can't do it. Now he ends off with the following. He says, I know who's out there. And I know there are fruma yidden out there that when they hear that I'm going to matter Bas Mitzvah, oi! It's goyish, it's terrible, it's arayis, and so forth. I know, he says. And I know there are many Jews who have gut reactions. And their gut reaction to anything that they didn't see their parents do is Chadash Asar Min HaTorah, which is a true concept. But I also want to tell them something else. That there does come a point where Gedolim have to make an evaluation that if something is needed for education, things can change. In yeshivas today, many yeshivas today, many Haredi yeshivas, they use smartboard. Smartboard. And I know some Rosh Yeshivas don't agree with it, don't allow it. It's not the Messiah. But most Rosh Yeshivas today, Haredim, they say, whatever helps with education. Why? It's not the minhag, it's not the Messiah. That's not always the end all. It's a very important feeling. I don't mean to minimize it. The point is not to minimize the concept of Chadash Asar Min HaTorah. The point is to maximize the idea that Gedolei Yisrael need to allow what works. And that the opinion of Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg was that understanding the needs of the times, understanding the Yeridas HaDoros, a girl would need a certain recognition of this milestone that she becomes chayiv in mitzvahs. And therefore his conclusion is, if in your community they're doing it, don't make a machlokes. Allow it to happen. Okay. So far among the Ashkenazim, what did we see so far? I might go overtime tonight, but I'm not going to be able to do this. There's no second to last year. So you'll come back next week, and if you don't, then you won't come the week after, right? Okay. But you should come. In 2 weeks it's going to be in the new Makkah, Mirz Hashem. So you're all invited. I hope you come. Okay. This is for Ashkenazim. Ashkenazim, Rav Moshe says he's not a big fan, and even in the house he discourages. The Zakan Aron said it's mamash asur, and Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, his opinion is that there is a lot of room to allow a recognition, at least not in the shul, for the celebration of Bas Mitzvah. Now let's talk about Sfaradim. Sfaradim, it seems like it's a completely different story. It seems like for Sfaradim, it's a different story. Ben Ish Chai writes in Parshas Reishon Rishona, a girl, on the day that she enters mitzvahs, Af al pi shaloi noagu lasis loy suda, even though the minhag is not to make a suda, she should be happy, she should put on big day Shabbos. If she could afford it, the father should buy her a new dress, make a shechiyanu, and the shechiyanu she should have kavanah for the new dress and for reaching the age of being chayv in mitzvahs. The Kaf HaChaim also writes, it is good, it is worthy, it is nice for a Bas Mitzvah girl to put on a new outfit or buy her a rimon. No, man, you come home. Here, Mazel Tov, you give her a rimon. Well, what's this rimon for? Well, Bas Mitzvah, you have to make a shachion, you make it on the rimon. Okay, so now, certainly, they didn't say you should make a Bas Mitzvah. All they said is, she should be besimcha, she should make a shachianu, and have in mind her reaching age. But what about a Bas Mitzvah? So there are two major tshuvas on the subject by the Sfardim. Number one is Shalas Tshuvas Yaskel Avdi Rabbi Vadia Haidaya. This was written in 1955 to another Dr. Shinzayan Kahana. No relation, I don't think, to the question is, could you make a Bas Mitzvah for a girl? He said, should you? You should. Why? He said, it's not fair. You make a Bar Mitzvah for your boy, how's your daughter going to feel? The boy becomes Bar Mitzvah, everyone makes a big fuss, and she becomes Bat Mitzvah. Nobody does anything? You should do it. Why? Kina. If the Rebbeinu Shalom made a wife, why is there a concept of a wife? Why did Hashem make a marriage? The answer is, so the Malachim should not be jealous. If the Rebbeinu Shalom has to worry about Malachim being jealous of Adam, you have to be worried about your daughter being jealous of your son, you should make a Bas Mitzvah. Now you want to know, is there any Makar in Chazal that there's a mitzvah to make a Bas Mitzvah? Yeah. He brings three sources. Number one, all of these three sources, Rav Moshe brought a raya fakert, that there's no Makar, but he brings a raya. Number one, the Pri Megadim asks that why doesn't the father make Baruch Shepatrani on a girl? So Pri Megadim says, well, a father doesn't have as many responsibilities for a girl, and therefore, when she becomes a Bas Mitzvah, it's not such a big simcha. Okay, says Rav Adi Hadai, it's not such a big simcha, but it is a simcha. So if it's a simcha, you should make a suda. The father should make a suda that Baruch Hashem, he is no longer culpable for his daughter's misdeeds. Number two, why do you make it for your son? Because he's chayiv in mitzvahs? She's chayiv in mitzvahs. Should make it for her. And listen to the following. Both Rav Avadia Haidaya and we'll see Rav Avadia Yosef, they make the following diuk from the Ben Ish Chai that I would humbly disagree with. Again, I'm not able to disagree with them, but just Laman HaLimud, maybe you could be mafakbik on the way they read the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai writes the following. He says, even though we just read it before, in number 16, even though it's not the meaning to make a suda, nevertheless, buy her a new dress and let her make a shachiano. So it says Rav Avadia Haidaya, Rav Avadia Yosef makes the same diuk. That's mashma, the reason why you don't make a suda, because it's not the minog. But if it was the minog, then you should do it. Right? Because he says, but since the minog is to have a little simcha and buy her a new dress, that you should do. But a suda, it's not the minog. Mashma, the implication is, if it was the minog, you should do it. And therefore his conclusion is, Roy lases gam suda labas, but it's not the minog. But if it's the minog, it's roy v'hagon. It's a good thing to do. Comes Rav Avadia Yosef, Yechav Edas Chelek Beis. Rav Avadia quotes the Gemara in Kedushin that when Reb Yosef, if somebody would tell him that he's chayiv in mitzvahs, he'd make a big suda. So we see from here that on the day that you become chayiv in mitzvahs, you should make a suda, and therefore says Rav Avadia, and then he quotes, the Ben Ish Chai, who says that the minog is not to make a suda. Rav Avadia says in the second column, number 19, the sixth line, min v'nir midvarav, that if the minog is to make a suda, hadavar roi v'hagon v'nechshav l'sudas mitzvah. Rav Avadia says not only should you do it, it's a sudas mitzvah, you could do it in the shul. So everybody thinks this shul is in a bad neighborhood. No, it's a great neighborhood. It's a Sephardi neighborhood. We could rent out the shul for Bas Mitzvahs for Sephardim. Because for Sephardim, it's a sudas mitzvah. And extra income. Okay? We'll have to discuss it. But that's, Rav Avadia holds, it's a sudas mitzvah. But Rav Moshe says, achiluk, listen carefully. Rav Moshe had a kasha. If the reason you make a bar mitzvah is because a boy becomes chayiv in mitzvahs, why wouldn't you do the same thing for a girl? What was Rav Moshe's answer? Moshe's answer is, by a boy, it's recognizable that he's chayiv in mitzvahs, and therefore you can make a suda. By a woman, it's not nicker that she's chayiv in mitzvahs. Says Rabbi Avadia, udvarav tmuim. I don't understand this chiluk. I'll read to you his words. Ein devarav mechuvarim lahalacha. The words of Rav Moshe, it pains me to say that. Look, to me, Rav Moshe is the final word. But now we're going to take this as just purely for the sake of limud. He says this split of Rav Moshe is not in accordance with halacha. Why? Who told Rav Moshe such a chiluk? If you're in a shiur and you're learning Reb Baruch Ber and you're saying lamdus and you want to make a hair-splitting chiluk, very nice, you can make chilukim. But lahalacha you need a basis from Shas and Poskim. Just to start making a chiluk in the air, by a boy it has to be recognized, by a girl it's not recognized. Who says it has to be recognized? Who says the definition of Sudas Mitzvah is recognized? Says Rabbi Vadia, he doesn't agree with this split, and the ikar is, he quotes Rabbi Avram Musfaya. Rabbi Avram Musfaya writes, in Be'orei, on the top paragraph, back to the top paragraph, he writes, in France, the minhag for many years is that every girl has a Bas Mitzvah. And then Rabbi Vadi uses a very interesting logic. Listen to this. He says the truth is, for Rabbanim not to allow a Bas Mitzvah, they're getting themselves in trouble. Because people are always criticizing Rabbanim and rabbis and Gedolim. You know what? You're not fair to women. The biggest criticism, Reform conservatives, you know what? There's no equal treatment in Orthodoxy. So maybe we would say, who cares what they say? Maybe that's what Moshe would say. Rav Adia says, no. You can't fight every battle. Certain times, you have to portray Torah Judaism in a way that people are not going to come with egregious accusations. Says Rav Adia, look, we believe Kol Kvuda Bas Melech Panima. We believe the honor of a girl is in a more modest domain. But nevertheless, if you're not going to allow her to recognize her Bas Mitzvah, people are going to point the finger and say, oh, look, the rabbis, they don't treat women equally, they don't treat them fairly, they're not sympathetic, and you have all the agunais and all the who knows what. No. You have to know where to give in, says Rav Avadia. Now, again, this is not for me to say, this is not for you to say, this is not for your local Orthodox rabbi to say, but Gedolei Yisrael. So you say, this, it seems like politics. Yeah, you have to know. You have to know. Everything is b'mishkal, everything is b'shikal hadas, everything needs the judgment of a Gadol B'Yisrael. Rav Avadia's judgment is that not to allow a girl to celebrate a Bas Mitzvah, it doesn't look good, be'enei hamakatrigim. And therefore, Rav Avadia concludes the following. At the Bas Mitzvah, let the father get up, let him say a Dvar Torah, let him say Zmira, Shiurim, V'Sishbachos, and his Sikum is the minhag of those who make a Bas Mitzvah on the day they're... Now, it's only on the day. By B'yom, he says. On the day, it's a very good minhag. You should say Divrei Torah, and you should make sure that none of the dictates of tznius, of immodesty, are violated. In other words, a Bas Mitzvah, maybe it should only be for the friends of the Bas Mitzvah girl, and maybe the father should say certain words to his daughter, and so forth. But the father takes responsibility that even if he's going to have some kind of celebration, nevertheless, everything needs to be within the dictates of tznius. Now, I'll just end off, back to the Ashkenazim. Tzitz Eliezer wrote a haskama to a sefer. This sefer is about Inyani Bar Mitzvah, and he writes to the author, I have some problems with what you wrote about Bas Mitzvah. Because this author apparently wrote that everybody agrees that it's allowed, and the Tzitz Eliezer says, how could an authoritative work on Bas Mitzvah write, everybody agrees it's allowed? If anything, many poskim say it's not allowed. Rav Moshe Feinstein, there's the Kan Aroin, the Kol Mevaser, the Divrei Yisrael, and it says, Tzitz Eliezer, count me among them. I would line up with those poskim who discourage and do not endorse the practice of Bas Mitzvah. Says Tzitz Eliezer, even if you're very careful, it's very unlikely that some of the guidelines of tznius will not be breached. After all, maybe a boy relative will be there, maybe even for the father, maybe your grandpa, and so forth. With all the hashkacha that you're going to have, it's unlikely that everything is going to be done kedas v'chadin, and therefore count me among those who do not participate, do not endorse. So bottom line is like this. By the Sephardic poskim, the Gedolei HaPoskim, Rav Avad Yosef, Rav Avad Hodaya, very much think this is an important thing. And I would add that many of the concerns that the Ashkenazic poskim had with Bat Mitzvah don't exist for the Sephardim. For many, many years, there's no Reform and Conservative Judaism by Sephardim. Unfortunately, now there is. So you can't say it crept into their culture through Reform and Conservative. It probably, by the Sephardim, it predated that. Women's lib, also, there was no such thing by the Sephardim. So many of the concerns that the Ashkenazic poskim had didn't really exist by the Sephardim. And recognizing the needs of the times, Rav Avad Yosef felt that it's a worthwhile thing. Now, Rav Moshe wrote his tshuva in 1957. Now, the last thing I want to do is, you wrote 1957, but today things are different. I'm the last person to ever say anything like that. Rav Moshe wrote it. You have to assume that things stand. But Lamaisa, regarding this issue, I think it depends where you live. If you live in a Haimish community where they don't do Bat Mitzvah, there's no reason to start it. Rav Moshe writes very clearly, no girl ever became frummer from a Bat Mitzvah party. What? Because now she got a balloon at her Bat Mitzvah, they got a t-shirt. I went to this Bat Mitzvah, and now she's going to daven better. It's ridiculous. Nobody ever came closer to Hashem. If they don't do it where you live, don't start it. Don't start it. Whatever love of Yiddishkeit a girl gets, she's going to get at home, she's going to get in school, not get a Bat Mitzvah. But there are communities, and I think this happens to be one of them, where it's very widespread to the point where I don't think in some communities everybody does it. That's the fact. That's the reality. So it's very reasonable to say, so what are you going to pick your kid out and say, no, you can't do it? Maybe don't do it in a shul, but to say not to do it at all, again, you have Gedolei Yisrael who, while they are at the forefront of standing up against any infiltration of foreign ideas in Yiddishkeit, they don't have a problem with this. Some of them even encourage it. So if you live in a community where everybody's doing it, and it's expected to do it, so what are you going to do? You're going to pick your kid out and say, no, you're different. We're so holy, we don't need to do it. If the family's on the Madrega, okay, something to consider. But if it's pretty widespread, there seems to be reasonable basis that it can be done. But again, I'm not here to encourage it. It's not something that was done for many generations. But based on the needs of the times, it's something that should be evaluated, I guess, in everybody on their own case-by-case basis, dependent on their family, on their children, and on their community, and their moirei drachim. And I wish everybody a wonderful evening.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.